Hello and welcome to the special edition of ET Now Startup Central. I'm Chandra Shrikant joining you from India Startup Hub, Bangalore, and we are at the Unplugged event. It's the flagship startup conference of Next Big What. And over the next 20 minutes, we are going to bring you voices from the startup world that will help you with tips and tricks that you need to thrive and survive in difficult times. We kick it off then with the fashion portal Voonik's founder, who really tells us about why Voonik is different from other fashion portals that thrive on discounts and about how he is taking his business beyond the tier 1 cities. Listen in to his conversation with ET Now's Rahul Dag.
You have to focus on high quality growth. Always growth is what is rewarded, whether you are a private company or a public company. People reward growth. If you don't grow, they are going to punish you, right? So you have to grow. But how do you grow in a way where you are growing a business model which is scalable, which is sustainable, and you are bringing a GMV which is repeatable, which is high quality, right? So that's what it comes down to.
Also, the market segment that you're after is the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 sort of a market where they don't really have options. What really drove that thought to ensure that, you will be chasing this sort of a consumer? And in terms of traction that you're seeing in terms of orders, daily orders, what is it that you can share?
Yeah. So actually, it took us almost 1.5 to 2 years to get to that realization, right? I don't know to lie that we had that epiphany moment, we had that idea. We started with focusing on metro women, and we immediately realized, if you look at women fashion, only 5 to 10% is organized. 90% is unorganized. People don't look at brand for buying a sari or a kurti or a lehenga or a dress material, right? So we figured out, when we went after women, there is this huge market, which is 90% of the market, where there are no solutions offered. They can buy from horizontals like Flipkart or an Amazon, but they are not built from the ground up for fashion. So suddenly you see a huge market, and you see a Myntra or a Jabong or a Eba or Agios just fighting for that small 5 to 10%, and you have this 90% where you can go and play, where you don't have much competition. You will be the first player there.
Interestingly, you mentioned in your talk that 20% of the commission you ensure you get it first. To ensure that your unit economics are in place. You're not in the heavy discounting sort of a model that everyone is. Tell for startups also watching the show, you've believed in this from beginning. How much of this bet has paid off to ensure you stick by the guns and ensure that your focus is right there on growth and on revenues?
I think we always feel there are two ways to do everything, right? So obviously to increase sale, one way is to do discounting, the other way is to grow high quality GMV. Similar way, we have to get lowest possible prices to the consumer. There's no doubt about it. There's no question about it, right? But again, there are multiple ways to get there, and most of the companies have chosen discounting from their own pocket. Right? But there are other options. For example, what Voonik did was we used technology. We used image recognition to kind of merge all the lookalike products and have only a single product detail page and allow the merchants to compete for the lowest price.
Startups really watching this show, what is it that you would want to tell them to survive in the tough times, because you've been through it? What should they be doing to ensure that they get through this cycle and are thriving?
I think first thing is we should be passionate about our idea. When we started in 2013, e-commerce was a bloodbath and everybody were pessimistic about it. But we still survived through that, right? So if hundreds of people are going to say, no, this is not going to work, right? If you believe in your idea, then you can come out of it unhurt, right? The second part is always operate in a very big market and go after segments in that market which currently don't have a solution. Like how we went after unbranded tier 2, tier 3, which nobody was focusing on. Everybody was going after metro. So there are always spaces. Apparel might look like crowded market, but the moment we sliced and diced like this, for us it was virtually no competition.
It's an environment where cash is not really easy to come by. So what do startups really need to do to grow and thrive with existing resources? Who better than to throw light on that than the former Chief Business Officer of Flipkart, Ankit Nagori. He, of course, recently quit to start out on his own. Let's listen in to his lessons from Flipkart that he's now applying to his new startup.
I really have been able to observe a lot of things which, while I was at Flipkart, did not get enough time. And while we were growing very, very rapidly and we were making the right choices either by fluke or by trial or by just doing the right things, a lot of startups, because of the amount of capital available in the system, have maybe skipped. So I thought it will be good to share some of the insights on what I have learned while at Flipkart, and more so while I've stepped out of Flipkart. So I think one thing which most of the startups and startup founders are not focusing on is waiting on the J curve. So I'm assuming a lot of the audience today here is the startups who have either raised a seed fund or in the process of seed fund, and not so much Series A and B. That's what Ashish told me. So I'll be tailoring my communication around that. So I think if you look at what typically most successful companies have done across the world, which includes the Ubers, Flipkarts, Amazons of the world, they've waited for the J curve. You have to keep playing with the product market fit, keep trying on building the right product, experimenting with the users, and wait for the J curve. I've seen a lot of startups which are forcing the J curve right at the beginning of the business.
The term unicorn is not fancy anymore. What investors are looking for these days are cockroach startups, ones that can survive and thrive in the most difficult of circumstances. Let's listen in to an excerpt from this panel comprising VCs, comprising entrepreneurs, to really talk about growth strategies in 2016, the metrics that entrepreneurs should be focused on.
Who isn't here as a consumer, a recipient, or a beneficiary of huge online discounts? And like, who doesn't love that? Yeah. The question sometimes we think about is that if companies were operating at normal metrics, like if Ola, Uber were not in a fair war, what would the actual market size of cabs be? If we all had to pay 2x, which is roughly at least what I think is the right number, how often would you take Ola, Uber versus an alternative? And similarly for e-commerce, what would the realistic usage be? There's no great way of using this, because in some things like Ola, Uber, they could probably charge a significant premium to what they are now, because we're also used to the convenience, and we'd still use it a lot. But there probably is some sort of fringe drop-off. Again, I was with an entrepreneur who runs a very successful offline business yesterday, and a great guy. He's built a large business, and his perception was that online is only for discounts, and the online customer only thinks of discounts. For his business, he advertised 0% online, because he thinks that that's kind of like the low-end customers that I don't want, which I thought was a very interesting perspective. Okay. Any thoughts?
Just extending that, right? So the question is obviously like, why is everybody pampering these customers? So in my experience, specifically within GO-JEK, there are two scenarios, very distinct scenarios, where you end up pampering a customer. What do you mean by pampering? Is just subsidizing whatever they are consuming. One is if you have a competitor and you are in this market grab part and you want to actually get as many customers as possible, so you keep on competing with each other on discounts, which is the obvious one. The second very interesting one that I came across is if you are creating a new market, which means that you want your customers to change their behavior, you really need to give them an incentive to do so. Right? For example, food delivery was not really a part of culture in Indonesia at all. Right? Like all the orders that we have is basically latent demand. Like nobody really predicted that the business can take off this much. And the way you ask customers to change their behavior is give them something that makes them change their behavior, saying that, hey, I'm too lazy generally to change my behavior, but this is so good that I'm going to try it out. And they will try it once, twice, thrice, 4 times, and hopefully see a value for which they will come back to you even after you stop giving them that discount. At least that's the hypothesis behind all of these things. So these two are very distinct cases where I've seen, it makes sense to give those discounts. And Indian customers are actually getting it both ways. There are a lot of larger companies competing against each other, which is why they get pampered. We have new services coming in which just did not exist in India before, so they are also giving discounts. So it's all good for all of us as consumers.
The year hasn't kicked off on the best note if you look at the kind of markdowns that the big companies are receiving and the dip when you see venture capital investments in the country. But that really hasn't stopped a lot of startups, entrepreneurs turning up at this event. We caught up with a few of them to really find out the mood on the ground, if all the negative news has really hampered them as they go about building the next big idea.
I have a few entrepreneurs with me here at the event. Let's try and gauge a sense of what they are thinking of the startup ecosystem. These are the real people who are really going out there and building companies. Coming to you first, we are at a time when, we talk about this pessimism in the environment. Funding cycles are down. Last year we happened to celebrate funding. Startups, we in the media covered it heavily. In this sort of a pessimism environment, what's keeping you motivated? What's getting you to conferences like this and ensure that you work on your startup and make it successful?
So if you ask me or anyone who's in startup business, all of us believe that it's a journey. It's not a one-day affair.
You're building something called Dhanno, that's interesting, connecting consumers to auto walas. Tell me about what gets you to events like these. Do you attend these events regularly, and what are your takeaways from events like these? Do you get to interact with VCs? You get, you talk to your fellow entrepreneurs here and get a sense of, are you on the right track? What gets you to events like this?
I belong to Indore, basically. Indore, in the north region, it is not so popular. This startup funding and all these things are very popular in south, like Bangalore. Right now, you are in Bangalore, and I used to attend these kind of meetings, conference, and these encourages us and helps us to build our what we are doing right now. Because what I am doing right now is a very calculated risk. We have to think about future. I am having a 50 members of team. We have to think of them also. They have already quit their jobs and they are working with us. So we have to think so much that there is a responsibility of 50 members on my shoulders. So I have to think so much. So these conferences help us a lot to maintain that sustainability with them.
Okay. Coming to you, what in particular are your takeaways from this event, Unplugged? We haven't really had big stars, so to say, the unicorns come here and talk. These are startups that are trying to solve real issues, small-scale startups. So do you connect with conferences like this, and what are your takeaways?
I think when you start running a company, it always happens that you're the one who's actually been taking decisions on a run to. It's always good to come to such events where you meet other people who are also facing similar issues. A few takeaways which generally tends to happen is like one is focus. That's one very important piece. Second is about saying no. So these are some very simple takeaways which you generally tend to hear, but you generally say, let's take it on the ride. Every time when you come to such kind of events, it actually pushes you, you should take those decisions which are bold. And once you take those bold decisions, the people who actually become unicorns are the ones who actually been able to take bold decisions. So these help you do the course corrections and make you move on in a better manner.
All right. The theme of this conference really is cockroach startups, the ones who would survive through the tough times. And it comes at a time, a very crucial time when funding cycles are down, data have backed it, entrepreneurs are also saying the same. Is this word a little demeaning, or you think it's perfectly fine, it's back to basics and building solid companies?
It's perfectly fine. And as Ankit was saying in his talk, it's very important for startups to realize that it's not very fast growth that's important. You need to get stable, you need to have a good product, and then you start scaling up with marketing. So being a cockroach startup is a really good term to have.
With that, we come to the end of the special coverage from Unplugged. The theme for this event is really the superhero theme, and I guess it requires the courage and grit of a superhero to really see your idea through execution. But before we wrap up, let me just take you through the key deals of the week on our weekly funding meter by Venture Intelligence. So this week was actually pretty good. Deals worth $135 million. The prominent ones being MobiKwik and Lenskart, which raised a fresh round of funding. We also saw a couple of small acquisitions happen in the startup space. Snapdeal made an acquisition, and we also saw a Y Combinator-backed startup get investment from US investors. On that note, we come to the end of this special episode of ET Now Startup Central. Have a nice weekend and keep it with ET Now.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.